everyone, and welcome to today's GESS Talks webinar. We appreciate you all joining us. Today we're diving into the cutting-edge world of educational technology and discussing how to effectively implement AI in education. Our panel of experts will share the latest advancements and practical strategies to help educators leverage AI and transform teaching to enhance student engagement. Before we get started, just a quick note for all of our attendees, you can find a control panel on the side of your screen, which will include a Q&A tab. So please feel free to use this tab to submit your questions throughout the session, as we'd love to hear your thoughts and ensure we address them during the discussion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our chair and moderator, Al Kingsley, CEO of NetSupport and a leading voice in the global EdTech community. So over to you, Al.
Thank you very much, and welcome folks wherever you are in the world for today's session. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and perfect timing for many of us in the academic year cycle. Having spent yesterday at a conference with this very topic, I'm really intrigued, and I'm sure many of you are, to get some more international perspectives and some views on how we can move the conversation forward. So before I start and we kick off with some hopefully nice challenging questions for everybody, I'd like to do some introductions. And this for me is the most challenging part, because we have a few Scandinavian pronunciations that I'm about to probably do a disservice to. But first, a nice easy one. Ty Pascal, Digital Education Cluster Lead at Bloom Charter Schools is here. Ty, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Kim Nielsen Arberg, teacher, Google Workspace Specialist at Askøy Municipality as an ICT advisor. I may well have pronounced that wrong, but we'll all just bear with it for that one. Tarja Pedersen, teacher at Klepesto Secondary School, or some school very similar in name to that. Again, really welcome. And last but absolutely not least, Ben Whitaker, Director at EduFuturist, well known as the Ideas Guy, and of course a former teacher himself. So a great collection of perspectives from around the world to talk about this tricky topic. Probably a topic that we're all talking about and nobody's particularly comfortable in knowing quite where they are or how to get started. And so let's see if we can dispel a few of those. I'm going to kick off with a question for each of the guests on this panel, and then we'll open up to a few broader questions. So hopefully you'll be able to cherry pick some ideas from this. And can I just remind you to look at the bios for each of the speakers and reach out to them on social media. I know they're all really good folks that'll be happy to share any words of wisdom with you if you make contact with them. So please bear that in mind. So Tarja, can I start with you on a question? I'm interested on your thoughts and approaches to empowering teachers to use appropriate AI tools as a value add in the classroom.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of demand now for teachers that want to have the knowledge of how to use AI. You have like a separate division of teachers. You have the ones that just dive into it and just start using it. And that's maybe a small part. And then you have like the large part that are maybe eager to use it, but they don't know how to start. They don't have the people around them that have the knowledge. So I think for them, you need to show them what AI brings a value into the classroom, not just another tool that you might use or something. You need to be showing, okay, this tool would work in this situation. They need to see the direct value of how can I use it in the classroom, and they need to use it by themselves. I think it's really important that it's not just another tool that some other people are told, you need to be using this one. They need to find out by themselves that this is not just something that would bring extra time waste for them. They need to bring it in. They need to see what can help the students achieve better learning or something that will improve their teaching. I think that's important, that they're not just doing the same thing, just using AI. You do exactly the same thing. You need to do the AI need to improve something. You need to have a value. I think that's very important to show the teacher best practice. I think they need to have some really good perspective on how to use it. I think that's the main issue here, that there is a lot of debate on which tools they're using, but maybe not how to use it. What kind of model are you using? I think that's a little bit irrelevant. It's how can we using it to bring something new into the classroom that helps improve learning. I think that's the main issue here, and I'm missing a little bit of that debate. I feel that there's a lot of debate what kind of language models you're using and those sort of things. I think it should be more on practical use in the classroom. I think that's a little bit of what's missing, and that's what a lot of teachers are telling me. They need to see the value it brings.
So that's really helpful as a starting point. So like many adoptions of any technology, and we've seen this journey before with other technologies, often we talk about the what we plan to do and how, but we forget to mention the why. And obviously what you're alluding to there is we need to understand why we're doing this. Do you think when you're talking about it in your schools, we confuse different topics? So we've got one topic, which is how AI can be potentially used to support teacher workload in creation of content and resources where appropriate. And we've got a second debate, which is about how are our students using it and how do we know if they're cheating and how do we maintain and moderate that? And we end up saying, let's do nothing because we can't figure out all the answers. How have you gone about that conversation in your school?
I think we're looking at how we can be using it as a tool, because that's also one of the questions many teachers ask. How can I see if AI is being used by the students? They wanted to get the tool that they can just put in and then, okay, this hand-in was made by AI. But I think we're looking maybe more into the process now, not just the finished result. I think that's what's going to be changing a bit, that we need to be looking more into the process. Maybe that's what we're going to be evaluating a lot more than just the final product, because that's how you can see if AI is used, if you look at the whole process, not just the end result. I think that's what debate in our school is more about too. How can we change our teaching?
That's a harder debate, isn't it? Because when we start talking about from a student point of view, we get into the conversation of how do we change the way that we might undertake assessment? How can we find different ways to understand whether children have actually got a grasp on that content knowledge? At the front end, and I know some of our colleagues here will probably carry on that conversation, the foundational bits are not always what tool, because there's a selection depending on what kind of environment you have in your school. But it's often about how do I start using that tool? How do I effectively question it? We've seen lots of resources about prompt engineering, but it's about finding the right purpose before you then can dive in and play.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a hard thing because this is a brand new technology too. It's something that we maybe didn't see but just a year ago we didn't see this as a big debate. Now it's everybody, and nobody. There is a few people that had knowledge of this before, and now we need to be addressing, because especially in Norway, almost every student are using it, and they started using it, and the teacher were not ready for it, and it's not like the tools we've been using before. Now they can mainly, they can turn in papers that are written totally by AI, and it's impossible to know if it's written by them or AI without talking to them and having a debate with them about the papers. I think that changes a lot, and nobody really has the answer for it.
I think it's an interesting one. I mean, I think we all know that if you want to use technology in a classroom with students, we need to make sure that teachers are empowered to have confidence in the same tools. Right. But you're absolutely right. There's a second conversation about from a student perspective. Very conveniently, Richard Mortimer, who is watching in from somewhere in the world, thank you, Richard, asked the question about how we get more from a student side and how that's used in the classroom. So I'm going to jump to Kim, because Kim, I'm interested in how you can kind of build on the conversation, but from a student's perspective and how that links with developing their skills as well, so that they don't rely on it, but they can use it where appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a tough question, because the students are already engaged in AI and they have already done a lot of experience when it comes to using the tools, and the teachers mainly are traveling a bit behind and trying to catch up with the students and trying to get them to focus on what's important. How can they use the tools to be a learning tool and not just something that gives them a shortcut on different assessments or different types. And what Richard is saying is teachers are now using it as a planning tool and giving out ideas. That is very good, and I think that's a good starting point. But I also believe that we need to listen to the students and what they say. Make them active in how can AI be used to enhance learning and not just be used as we often compare it to the calculator. When that came into the classroom, this was a revolution for students, but it was also a method of getting the answer too quickly and not being able to look back to the process and what is actually learned. Have you read this paper? Have you been interactive with the paper or the article? And what is the outcome after when you're turning in the paper? So I think that the student voice needs to be lifted up together with the teachers, and we have to involve them as well. Because at the moment, I would say that students are almost at the same level, maybe some are ahead when it comes to utilizing AI. And they also have great ideas and great inputs in how to be able to make it more effective. But of course, there's a jungle of tools. There's too many. There's changes coming every week. I just read that Microsoft had developed an offline AI, so you can have a language model downloaded into the computer and use the browser. So that also creates a lot of different aspects on how to use it and how to use it responsibly. So I think we need to listen to the students. We need to be able to hear them out and to incorporate them in how to guide teachers also, but together with the students. Students need to be using AI enabled to enhance learning, or it's in my eyes, it's not a tool that you want to use. If that's not
Kim, that's an interesting point because back to the earlier point of we tend to lump one problem with AI into a single category and find it too complex to unpick. There are some parallel strands here. We've got schools saying our biggest pressures right now. Some might be teacher recruitment, retention, workload. Some is about how do we provide quicker feedback to our learners. Some's about personalized learning pathways. Some's about digital skills for our learners. And they almost need to be treated as separate strands because otherwise we kind of lose focus in terms of how do we mitigate each of these different challenges. And just because our students are accessing AI at home doesn't necessarily mean that they're using it most effectively. They're understanding how they can use it, whether it's role-based, whether it's about much more focused criteria, or have the conversation and the skills around challenging the accuracy of the information, challenging bias and other bits. So, within your school, are you trying to look at the role and adoption of AI as separate elements within your broader digital strategy, digital vision, or is it something that's still in its infancy?
Still early days, but we are looking into how to incorporate it, as Taya mentioned, in the process of an assessment or assignment. And when you do that, you also touch on the topic of critical thinking, and you also use it together with the students to make them aware that this is the wrong way of using it. And this is because there's enormous potential in using AI. But if you don't know how to utilize that, it will just become putting power on the PDF because it won't change anything. So if we want to change the skill sets that the students will need to have, then we need to set our teachers up so that they know how to facilitate the tools, and they know how to, and they have to be secure and safe when they do it. And they have to feel that, okay, this brings value, as Talia said, but also the students need to be aware, okay, I can use it in this way. If I use it the other way, it will be regarded as cheating, or I won't learn anything from it. And then it won't help me in my academic life. It will just create problems. I will never face an uphill hurdle that I have to get over. I just can press play and everything works out. But that I mean, that is probably the main challenge, to be able to sort out all of these different tools and teach the students how to be effective when using it. If we can do it, I think we can unleash almost anything inside of education. If we don't take it seriously, it will be like wild west, when you just unleash this power and students are going wild with it, and that will not be beneficial for anyone.
I think we can all sign up to that. I think much as we've had different iterations of technology that have created the fear factor, from the calculator and shouldn't we have it in the classroom, to access to search engines and our ability to access resources. At some point we reach a natural point of saying we don't get to pick in education what our learners will be exposed to in their adult lives, in the workplace, in their home lives. We need to equip them with the skills to use those tools effectively and with purpose, give them agency, I guess. And so with that in mind, it is about just because people can use tools doesn't mean that they're digitally literate with them and they're using them effectively. I'm also going to ask, because I'm going to come on to Ben in a second, which is, from a broader perspective, in my work with lots of different clusters of schools, typically decisions about what we're going to do come from senior leadership and are distilled down. And senior leadership will have the most experience, whether it's on educational reform, impact on different areas. But when it comes to AI, it isn't necessarily the senior leadership's area of confidence and comfort, because it's so new that actually there's very few people that have got that lived experience in the classroom. So it creates a sense of how do we create some sense of a strategy, a whole school ethos that empowers the right staff to actually move the conversation forward and then share that information with others so that we actually start to build confidence. And in terms of trying to figure out that idea, it might as well come to the ideas guy himself, Ben. So Ben, if we've got schools, and I'm sure we've got lots by the looks of it, wow, lots and lots, who are listening and thinking, we'd like to encourage this approach where staff are empowered to start to build confidence in using AI and start having the conversations about how we can use it with purpose. How do you go about creating a culture that allows that technology, that approach to be embedded and move forward?
Thanks, Al. I think in my mind, the key part of that element is that culture bit that we've said there. And I know that you've asked the question around culture, is that it's very easy for us to dive into, here's a plan, here's a strategy, here's a set of tools, here's a training plan, here's some development ideas, here's another inset day to train our staff how to use something. But if we haven't got a culture that has allowed for managed risk taking, for example, so we're not just saying take a risk, we're saying let's manage that risk, let's think about what the implications for this will be and how we're going to ensure that we ensure that everybody's safe in the space. We're not saying let them loose, but we have to have a culture where there's managed risk taking. I think has to be part of that. And then tied to that, I think a culture that allows for almost a collaborative approach, that it's not just a top-down, you're going to try this, and this is the tool that we've agreed on. It's almost like those at the chalk face that, like you said, are saying, this is the challenge we're facing, this is the thing that takes the time, this is the stuff that's affecting our well-being, our workload, and rather than we think this is what you need because we sit in a lovely little office with a nice fireplace, and I've been the guy that's done that, right, who says this is the tool we're going to use. Actually, it's about the working with staff, that collaborative approach that allows that managed risk taking to kind of embed itself. And then I suppose more than anything in that is that there's an awareness that failure, in whatever we want to call failure, as when things don't go exactly as they need to be, like how do we own that and how do we learn from that? So it's that reflective element of culture that says, okay, we tried X tool, it didn't work. Was that because the tool's rubbish? Was it because our wireless access is down? Was it because students were doing it on a Tuesday afternoon when all they want to do is go outside and play football? Or were there other broader implications in that space? Like, so it's that idea of managing the risk taking, working together to solve solutions rather than top down approaches. And then I think that idea of embracing that when things go wrong, that's okay. And if something seriously goes wrong and we have to go through the process of what it needs from a safeguarding perspective, from a child protection perspective, from a data privacy or whatever else goes, let's own that as well, hands up, rather than trying to hide and pretend that it didn't happen. That's for me what's been working with the organizations we've been working with that have seen success in this space.
Let's unpick a few of those bits, Ben. So I often work with clusters of schools in the UK Multi-Academy Trust, for those who are overseas. And sometimes their AI adoption policy is something that probably could be leather bound and published as a work of art, which I roughly translate as something that nobody will read and retain. Our forgetting curve is such that page 3 is as far as we ever get on that. So one of the simpler things, and I'm interested in your perspectives, that I often share with trusts is about, let's just simplify it down to, there are a small number of approved applications, depending on whether you're a Microsoft, a Google school, or whatever. If you use a tool, use it to, if you're playing with it as a teacher, use it to create content, but don't upload personalized student data to the tool. If you create any output that's more than 2 sentences long, cite it. Signpost it in your lesson resources, you're planning your notes. This was generated by tool X. If you do something that works really well, have a place where you can share it as an example with others. If you do something that fails spectacularly, have a place where you can share it with others. And in your process, find a close to the loop at the end of an academic term or whatever it may be, where you can actually get together, a bit of a teach me, show and tell. Here are the things that I've been using that have really worked well. So actually but that is the culture of promoting sharing. Yes. And part of the culture is that sense of risk, but within these confines, that means that we feel you'll be safe, but we're giving you enough flexibility to start to build confidence. How does that sound as a kind of a line in the sand compared to what you've been doing?
I think it's exactly where we need to be. It ties all that idea around managed risk taking. It gives that space for working together in collaboration, and then that ability to own when things go wrong. Interestingly, in that as well, it's that almost that empathy piece that is kind of become a buzz phrase, but shouldn't be a buzz phrase. So the empathy piece of allowing us to understand how learners are working in that space and how other staff are working in that space. The empathy piece understands it all, and then actually that is the bit, and we'll probably get into at some point, like how do we ensure from a human and AI perspective, how do we work together? It's that the reality of it all is that the thing that makes us stand out probably more than most is that ability to acknowledge feelings and the way that this addresses people. So I think we can weave that part into it as well.
Perfect. And anybody listening, if you reach out and connect with me, I'll happily share you a draft, nice and simple policy template based around those bullet points I've just shared, but nice and simple. Ty, the most patient member of our panel, who has been nodding away on lots of things. Before I come to you on a question that I had planned, is there anything you want to pick up on from what you've heard so far? Because there's lots of this that I know is absolutely in your wheelhouse.
This is perfect. It's like I'm just the choir that's coming in closing after these great sermons, because I will confer with all of this, especially what Ben was saying, and I know it kind of goes along with what we were talking about before with this entire panel, like just failing forward, right? But at the same time, documenting that in my context, we have a very unique situation where I have multiple schools within my network. So we were able to simultaneously try different things at different locations, at different cycle levels, right? So, and just created a matrix of things after, a period of academic terms of low, middle, and high ways for AI to enter into the classroom. Like, what does that mean? And as educational technologists, we now are exposed, and kind of our superpower is now exposed to admin and senior leadership that wasn't necessarily understood before. We as educational technologists know the summer model, right? But someone that is, in math or science and then came up to, SLT through, another traditional route, they're not exposed to that. So applying just, those simple things that we know as technologists, as educational technologists, summer model, I'm just going to substitute a task with AI. I am just going to augment a task with AI. I am just going to modify a task, and then I'm going to use AI to recreate something, and allowing those, levels of measurement to insert themselves at a low, middle, and high, rate, depending on the age group or depending on the, the amplitude level. Am I talking about a low student or am I talking about a high student? Like what that then looks like. So creating an entire matrix of where to actually implement this. And this looks different, everywhere. I am in a network of schools where everyone at our school are second language English learners, right? So it's a no-brainer to say maybe AI allows you to create a writing piece that then can be discussed and then used as a first draft instead of using it as, the final draft that you submit. I know you used, the question is how do we know students? If you actually know, like if you know your students, sometimes, even the language and the flow of the grammar and words, you don't have the aptitude level to be able to do that on your own, because I've never seen that before. And now all of a sudden this is a Pulitzer winning prize, document. Like you used something. So it was very easy for us to recognize like those kinds of things, first of all. But then not shying away, like not saying no, because then we remind ourselves as educators, like, what are we really here for? We're, and I love the insertion of empathy, right? Maybe this gives a student an opportunity to have a voice that they wouldn't necessarily have because they're, afraid to share, in written words or, a created piece that they've done themselves. So allowing that to be, okay, first draft, maybe even second draft, but at some point in time, I'm going to need you to learn what the AI actually did and why certain choices were made. So those were things that we started implementing. It's fine. We're going to have these AI times in our, schedules in our classrooms. But at the same time, we empower teachers to also do things like try to guess what the AI is going to say, or, critique, with a rubric what the AI output was, right? So now that is an assignment instead of me just allowing a student to write a piece or, answer questions that are going to be factual. And of course, the computer could do that. But then let's, challenge ourselves to then figure out how to elevate those answers and then go back to the form that we understand as teachers, that the highest level that I want to get a student to is creation, right? So then be able to take them up that Bloom's taxonomy, even using AI, but now you've seen what it does. Now you create on your own that would match or even be beyond what this AI has done.
I love that. And I'm guessing when Ruben Quintanjura did the SAMR model, he wasn't thinking of substitution being your work's done by AI rather than by yourself. But maybe there's been a conversation when it comes to the fear factor of adopting in schools, that maybe some staff feel that there's a risk of substitution by AI. So how do you mitigate that sense of it's there as a lever, as I don't want to use a trademark term, but a co-pilot to support and reduce teacher workload so there's more human time in the game?
So it's funny you use that word, because we actually just piloted another program for this academic year we opened it up to a larger amount of teachers. So it really was kind of even I would say it was used to gain the interest first, but then it was almost kind of rewarding for teachers to feel like they were a part of making change in our network, that they were testing these things out that were going to be used, network wide. So it kind of became a privilege kind of thing. And people, like really came out to support, the initiatives that we were introducing. So it became more of a community and a collectiveness, just like what Ben said. We're going to evaluate all these things ourselves. We're going to, find the best practices. We're going to share. We're going to fail together. We're going to, say, this is what I'm doing. Come watch and model and all those great things that we already do in education. We just put the layer of AI on it so that we could be the change that we wanted to see in our schools, but in reference to using AI.
So I'm going to pick a few questions in due course from the Q&A. So if anybody's got any other questions, I'll do my best to squeeze a few in. I suspect many listening will say, well, okay, you're all on journeys with your own schools or schools that you've been supporting that are stepping stones. And sometimes failure is a stepping stone to success. That's a nice way of trying to remember. But they're on stepping stones of adoption of AI within the educational setting. What was step one? Was step one building teacher confidence and identifying the right tools? Was step one bringing everyone together and say, who knows anything about this and how do we move it forward? Was step one, we need to focus on the student side first before we worry about teacher side? Again, I think a lot of people are listening thinking we have a desire to do this in our schools, but we're struggling with how we get a safe way to start to feel our way through. And I'm going to look for any wavy hands who want to jump in on that one. Ty, go for it.
I'll go for it. So, if there's anyone that's here within, an IB context, you will know, these learner profiles and these things. It just really came out of curiosity, right? So, of course, it was the educational buzzword, for the past year and a half. So we already had teachers, and it was funny. I did a campaign, and I was just like, there's no more AI shaming. Right. We had an induction ceremony and I was like, we are no longer AI shaming. And as soon as I said that, there were so many teachers that were like, I've been using it. I'm so glad I was in, because it was like they were in secret. And then it's like somebody exposed it. It's like, okay, all right, you're right. I've been writing lesson plans for the past month and a half using ChatGPT. And it was like, okay, great. So now how do we build on that? How is the output been? Has it been the same? Have you, seen any changes on your prompts or, what? And then just sharing what was happening. So it started at that level of first just removing that veil of shroud of shame, because it really and truly, it kind of felt like that for the longest. Like, I shouldn't tell anybody that I'm not, doing this with my own brain power. It's like, no, it's fine. It's actually okay.
Now, I love that. Taye, I saw you were smiling there. I'm interested from your perspectives.
Yeah, I think I really liked the one about curiosity, because me and Kim we're a little bit the same. We just dive into it stuff. We've done a lot of different things. If it's virtual reality or what it is, we get computer games. But I think it's curiosity of how can you be using this tool? I think that was really important for us. And we've been trying a lot of different things. We use it in writing, but also in simulation training. We've done a lot of different things. And some work, some doesn't work at all. And some works with one class, some the next class you're doing exactly the same thing. It didn't work at all. So it's very interesting to see. And also then how the technology has changed from the beginning to now. We've done our own language models that we prompt, and the answer just been totally different from 1 year ago until now. So it's really changed. So that's, for some, that might be very hard, but for us, we have an interest in this. So I think we're just trying to see how can it improve teaching. I think that's also very important. Our main goal is, what will the students learn? So we've been using it when we did the writing session. We used the students could be using AI, but they need to document everything they did. And what we saw was that the high level students were one that really used it because they understood, okay, it's good that this feedback is good, this feedback is not good, so I'll using the good feedback. But other students might just take everything and just believe. So that, I think that's also something that's going to be really important to teach the student how to use this as a tool, because otherwise you will have like this gap between the ones that know how to use it as a tool and the ones that just copy it, and then everybody can see this is not your work. So I think that it's going to be more and more important, and also the critical aspect of fake news now, what is true and what's not. I think that it's so much here that we need to be teaching our students.
Well, you'll be shocked to hear we've got an awful lot of questions that have come in, and most of them look way more exciting than the ones I was planning on asking. So I'm going to dip into a few and see what you folks think, and we'll see what we do. So I have one from OJ Rahim, who wants to ask the question: how can AI help with accelerating the learning of SEND students? Is it beneficial to ask the students themselves of how the AI can help them in improving their learning? I think that's a really interesting question. I have to declare that I am the independent chair of the SEND board for my region. And one thing I would say is AI is already being used, but not non-generative in terms of personalized learning pathways, tools that will make sure that the questions being asked can consolidate foundational knowledge, provide some stretch and challenge. Sometimes it's gamified a bit to support with learner engagement, but it's already being used. But beyond that, obviously, we could be talking about the audio interface to AI. We could be talking about how AI can signpost things. Anyone want to share any thoughts, ideas, or experiences from a SEND perspective? Ty?
I was going to say, Al, this is actually, one of my next levels of research, and have already started of using AI specifically for SEND students, because it creates that equity with, students that would not be able to contribute in the normalized way. I just approach it and with our SEND and inclusion leads, we include it as a modification, just like you would with any IEP situation, right?
Yep.
A student is allowed extended time, or a student is, allowed to be in a controlled environment instead of the, normal area. All these inclusion, techniques that we currently use for students, but allowing a chat box or a bot or a language model to be used for a SEND student. That's a modification, and this is something that we have started to implement already this academic year, and I'm researching that, because I think that is something that would then take the next level overall education, that certain students should automatically be able to use language models and text to image and all of these things that help with the creation level.
Absolutely. And there's another good reason to connect with Ty, because you can follow some of the stuff he'll be sharing in due course. It aligns with another question that maybe others can pick up on as well. We've got one here from Richard in Bangkok. Would you recommend that schools should employ API developers and in the future agent trainers to help enhance our schools' AI advantages? Well, I'm going to pose the question. I'm going to just preempt and say, in a rapidly moving space, I'm not sure now's the time that you want to be doing that. However, because it ties in a little bit with student agency and SEND students and the broader community, there have been some good work where we've seen, as you referred to, the bots being developed by schools, sometimes with our older students, as co-produced with students as either wellbeing assistants or resource providers. Anyone have any thoughts about that? I mean, I quite like the idea of project-based learning. It's all kind of ties in potentially. Ben, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, if I just mention quickly on the SEND stuff that was just mentioned there as well, is that, and then I've got a thought on that bit in terms of when it comes to SEND. Obviously, from a traditional perspective, a lot of the changes or the adaptations that are done through curriculum have been focused on a certain type of SEND, a certain type of need. But interestingly, needs like ADHD and autism are almost there's a real powerful supercharger that comes by using AI. And I talk from personal experience from somebody who recently diagnosed ADHD, who now uses things like transcripts and AI note takers. And what it does is it doesn't make me lazy. It allows me to be fully present in a meeting or fully present in a lesson, because I know that somebody else is doing the bit that I would panic about, forgetting the thing that I'm supposed to have done by the end of the lesson or the end of the meeting. Yeah. So actually, that level of equity and bringing people into the room, you can be fully present and bring your full authentic self into a lesson, into a space. If you're allowed some of these tools, it's not just about here's text to speech, although all those things are amazing, right? But in terms of like whether we should employ API developers and agent trainers, I think there is absolutely an opportunity for that co-creation that you've said there, Al, with students in that project-based learning space. What I would say as well is that what I'm seeing in terms of the AI tools being able to help with API in AI means that it's democratizing that skill set that coders and API developers and agent trainers are going to need to do. So what would have been a very, very specialist job that you'd need to employ from a school, you're now somebody who's got a basic understanding of what an API does and how we develop agent trade. You can work with an AI tool to be able to maybe mitigate some of the costs that come out there. I'm not saying that's the only answer, but it's certainly worth considering in that space. Has been my thought in there.
Can I ask, Kim Tahe, have you come across or played with any GPTs or bots that you can see being used within the educational setting?
Yes, we have produced our own. So we have built it with Google's APIs. We actually had a 17-year-old, apprentice working together with us. So he was the API specialist, which was very interesting. So we learned a lot. We're not API or trainers. No one has that skill set from before, but the 17-year-old, he knew how to Google and go to YouTube, and we talked also with Google and found out. So that's a learning curve there in itself, but it also creates, as we've been discussing today, the failure stuff happens all the time, and I really like that. What I'm a bit worried about is that you create huge differences between who can provide students with these tools and who can't, and who will block it out. So I'm a bit afraid of the differences that we might be able to see in the future. Hopefully more and more will embrace it and will put it into their educational programs, but I'm afraid we're looking into differences between countries, differences between schools when it comes to being able to assess AI in a good manner or in an ethical way, and every aspect of using AI. But we're not experts in APIs, but we use it in our own chatbots that we have built for our students. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that there are already some AI for assessment frameworks that are being shared by different ones. I mean, government is always an interesting one. If we're waiting for government, generally it's following well past the point where stuff's happening and tends to be more about the limitations and restrictions. My personal perspective is we level down. The best research, the best evidence comes from our PLN and our peer network, looking at the research and resources of what work well. We've been talking about AI tools in terms of how we can work with our students, our SEND students, thinking about reducing teacher workload, using whatever tool of choice you like. We're trying to be agnostic in this live conversation. The question's been asked on here, which is, do we know any tools that help us identify what percentage of content has come from AI in a student's work? Now, we all have different opinions. My perspective would be I wouldn't bother looking for that tool because they don't exist. That would be my simple response. But help me out and tell me I'm right or wrong, folks.
No, you're right.
Yeah. 1,000%.
We have a unanimous verdict. I mean, this, of course, don't forget, is now our secret AI club. For everybody who's joined this call, we're all allowed to talk about AI openly. The reality is, again, you're chasing a false hope and a constantly moving position. Kim, did you want to expand?
Yes, because Taj touched base on it when he talked about learning with the AI as a first draft and as a second draft. I really
Yeah.
liked that one, because then you create an awareness with the students on, okay, this is what it can do. This is amazing. This is good. And then there's also a question from, I think it is Gerard. He asked for the learning curve. And that is also very interesting. So if you look for that in the use of AI and use it together with the students, you can find what the learning curve is.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be able to supplement it with anything. You don't replace a tool or a teaching style with AI. You use it together with all the other ones and try to enhance the learning curve, or try to enhance the learning outcome. So I really like that, and that also connects with what we're trying to do, and it also connects with how it started in our own municipality. What can the students learn? That's a very important question.
So is one of the challenges we get from this, and Ty, perhaps you can build on it for me, you know, if we're saying, look, you can't detect when students are using AI, this is about changing the way that you allow it to be used within teaching and learning. And as a result, you have to adapt the way that you undertake your formative assessment. The question then is, well, I'm a really, really busy teacher and I've got 1,000 things to think about. How do I find a way to gently move myself into building confidence in actually achieving that? Ty.
So that's what I was going to say. And you hit it, you know, right there, Al. Like, as a teacher, I don't even see most teachers have the time to start investigating why, you know, or how much, you know, a student used AI. Like, why waste your time on that? Like, unless you want to get into, you know, like, you know, location searches and API, you know, you know, addresses and those kinds of things, and finding the origins of images. And most teachers don't care about that. And it's, I know where the concern comes from just, you know, academic integrity. But if we take this, you know, if we take the stigma, I still think it's a stigma because it's so new. We're only, you know, 2 years in it, and everyone that's sitting on this panel now, because we're early adopters, we get to say we're experts. But, you know, who knows 20 years from now? I think that is how I drive most of my conversations with, you know, leaders and teachers, is take off your glasses of now and think about what 30 years from now looks like. I do have children, right? So I have a 15-year-old and a 6-year-old in my home. So I look at, do I want them to just know how to write on a piece of paper and know how to use the books to research, to, you know, give their thoughts on something? And the answer for me as a father is no. One of the greatest gifts that my grandfather gave me was a set of encyclopedias. And he used to say all the time, because I would ask him questions, and he said, I don't know, son, go look it up. I hate that my grandfather did not get to see Google, because that's what he used to do to me when I was 6, 7 years old. I don't know, go look it up. I go find out about the Sphinx in Egypt because my grandfather said, I don't know, those encyclopedias are over there, go look it up. So I feel the same, you know, as a parent, as a school leader, as an educator. We don't know yet, but let's try it. Let's look it up. Let's find and fail together. Like Kim said, I'm going to take an apprentice on. I know that at each school, there's some kid that's, you know, locked in his room trying to figure out how to break ChatGPT and build another bot. But guess what? I want that to come out. I want that to be seen. I want you to help. So I think it's when we allow students to feel like your contribution is still leveled with someone else that's able to do something. And I think that's what's really changing what we need to be evaluating as teachers. What does it mean to, like, produce something? You know, what does it mean to, you know, and this is a paradigm shift for the world? You know, what does it mean to not be a politician and all of a sudden you run a country? Like, we had to shift our minds. Like, what? So I think this paradigm shift happens now in education. What does it mean that if I have a generator that can give me answers, that's great. But we as educators know that just having the answer is just the lowest level of the Bloom taxonomy of learning. Great, you can regurgitate the answer, but what is that then, that higher level of thinking and training our brains, what does that mean? So that's where we need to focus as educators and shift our minds towards what just the output of what things could be. And then develop matrix and rubrics and things like that to then frame those creativity, because we're going to have to keep creating, but always have those frameworks of rubrics of, okay, this is what it means is if you accomplish this, this, and this, you know, and then that's where we can get our scoring. That's where we can get our marking, our progress, you know, those things. But don't be afraid to have to reevaluate or evaluate something that's a totally different output than what I normally were, you know, used to receiving.
I'm going to jump to Ben in a second. It sounds to me like for some crazy reason you're that summarizes, don't forget the pedagogy behind the technology as well, which I think is a really, really important one. A few people have asked questions about future gazing. So as I come to Ben, I'm just going to have everyone think a little bit about the what next. I don't think we can crystal ball gaze 5 or 50 years ahead, or even 5 years, but we can start thinking of the next few years and thinking about how we either see AI as eroding what we're doing within the education system, or how we're seeing strategies that allow us to enhance what we're doing, to free up that human time, to improve the experience for the child, the engagement, make us better informed about data and capturing information. There's lots of strands. And I'm really mindful that I think a lot of people still have a mindset that at some point AI replaces the human. And increasingly, I think the evidence is the more there's AI, the more those human-based skills and empathy and the critical thinking and other aspects become almost amplified in my eyes. So Ben, I've thrown quite a few different thoughts up in the air for you, and then I'm going to come to the rest of the group to see what they think about what next.
I think we've been really fortunate on the Edge Futurist podcast to kind of interview some incredible thinkers who were literally future gazing around where education could be, and some of them that are living and breathing a very, very different way of doing it. So that has been a privilege of the last 9 years, speaking to those kind of people, including Mr. Kingsley a few times on that said podcast. But what I would say most about this is that I've been reading a lot recently about Benjamin Bloom's thought process around that 2 sigma problem, right? So the biggest lever in that they believe that will make the biggest impact on student progress, which is what we care about, students moving and learning and growing. That's what we're all in this game for, right? The biggest lever would be one-to-one tutoring. That's the evidence and the research says one-to-one tutoring would have the biggest impact on student progress. Well, we can't do that in the scale that we have right now. We can't do it in the system that we have right now. So anything that allows that one-to-one, not necessarily as a replacement of, but as an addendum to, as an extension of, as an augmentation of the person in a classroom, the person on an online classroom, the person in a wherever that learning space is, that augmentation with an AI one-to-one has got to be a very near future, if not longer. Obviously, we've seen Carmigo and others that are trying that conversation, and Synthesis and others that are really trying to push that AI tutor model. And I think that is going to be part of it. But we all want that personalized for our individual learners, right? It's that idea that what they've already got, rather than a one-size-fits-all curriculum and perhaps you have to be measured and assessed in an exact same way because that's what the standards say for that age group. Well, perhaps we're going to move to a more holistic, personalized curriculum that the AI can enhance. And I think that's what I'm seeing. I'm not putting names or times or values on that, but I would suggest that that's where I think we'll move to.
I really like that, Ben, and I have to say, I'm in the book I'm currently writing. I referenced the 2 sigma. I also saw some research that maybe his cohort that he tested against was very narrow, and there's challenges. But actually, the concept of where AI can provide some of that parallel personalized learning, that tutoring alongside the human, stands up to common sense as much as anything else, alongside the evidence. But I really like that. I'm quite happy for a hands up. Whoever wants to dive in first, thinking about next steps, what might be happening over the next few years, where we can perhaps focus our attention for the most benefit. You've all been very polite. Kim, I'm going to pick you. Sorry.
Yeah, I was at the front end of my seat, mainly just because I'm agreeing with Ben. I also believe that personalized learning. I'm thinking about learning styles. Different types of learning styles, hopefully, or maybe that's not the way to go, because you learn often when you're faced with adversity or problems. And if you tailor the learning experience into your personal learning style, it doesn't necessarily mean that you learn more. Sometimes we have to be outside of the comfort zone to be able to push through a problem. Creating difficulties for students will teach them on how to manage these types of situations. So hopefully we can split the 2, but also strongly believe that personalized learning, hopefully that will be the future, near future, as Ben said.
Well, if
it's very
teacher numbers, we'll have no choice.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm conscious we've got 3 minutes, folks, so I'm going to get a quick insight from Ty and then Terje, just to see whether you got any thoughts.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that I don't want to, again, like Ben, put a timeline to things, but I do think that, within the next 5 to 10 years, this, newness would have already worn off. The, bell curve of people who, are early adopters to, already having an intermediate level of artificial intelligence will, of course, be taken over. And then I just practically, because anybody that knows me knows I try to give practical answers. I just think that as educators, we're going to have to really step into, this industry of AI, because Silicon Valley will take over, and then it will be controlled by, tech people who are not first thinking about students. So I would encourage as many, educators, senior leaders, people that, make decisions, start framing things now so that when tech and big tech come in, we already have our standards and we have our non-negotiables, because they will come.
Perfect. And to wrap it up, Tahir.
Yeah, I was agreeing with Tyus. I think that this is such a new technology that we can actually, for one of the first time, be in front. The teacher can be in front. We can be using it, and we can use it in a good way. So I think that's really important. But what I see in Norway is a lot of teachers asking for like the national government to come in and give the guidelines. I think that what we'll be seeing in Norway too, that it won't be each school from themselves. We need something from a national level. I think that's going to be important too. But as me and Kim, we love to explore. We try finding new ways. We really love this opportunity too, to just what can this technology bring to the students. I think that for us, that's the motivation.
Perfect. Well, listen, I know we could have talked for 3 hours with some of the questions that have been raised, and maybe we would have been on that forgetting curve rather quickly towards the end of that. But thank you to everyone who's joined in. Please do reach out to the good folks here. They're all really helpful people who will share insights. I also share on a Saturday morning insights on AI and education on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. And a big thank you to the GESS team for always providing the great platform to bring these conversations together. So I think on that basis, I'm going to say thank you and hand back to our host.
Lovely. Thank you very much, guys. That was such an insightful discussion. I know everyone was really enjoying it. We've had a lot of questions come through. If any of our attendees have got any other questions that we weren't able to get to and you want to connect with our speakers, then please reach out to us by emailing marketing@guesseducation.com, as we'd all love to hear from you. You will be redirected to a short survey as soon as the webinar ends, so please take a moment to share your feedback and suggest any topics that you'd like to see in future sessions. And if you'd like to revisit today's webinar, it will be available on the GESS Education website as well as our YouTube channel, and we'll send out a recording to all the attendees via email as well. So a huge thank you to our panelists and to our audience for tuning in today. We'll be announcing our next webinar soon, so be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on social media, and visit the GESS Education website to stay updated on all of our latest events. But until next time, take care, have a wonderful rest of the week, and goodbye for now.
Bye, everybody.